Hi, this is Ed Fitzpatrick. If you enjoy local politics as much as I do, be sure to join our friends at Rhode Island PBS for the show A Lively Experiment. Hosted by Jim Hummel, the weekly series features journalists, pundits, and politicians debating the stories and issues that matter most to us Rhode Islanders. Tune in to A Lively Experiment and be part of the conversation. Fridays at 7 p.m. on Rhode Island PBS and wherever you get your podcasts. From the Boston Globe, this is Rhode Island Report. I'm Ed Fitzpatrick. Welcome back to the podcast where we bring you big conversations from our very small state. It's been nearly 18 years since security officers discovered a one-room apartment within the walls of the Providence Place Mall. It was built by a group of local artists led by Michael Townsend and his then-wife Adriana Valdez Young. Now, there's a full-length documentary about their secret mall apartment. Its first theatrical screening is tomorrow at, where else? The Providence Place Mall. Michael and Adriana are here to tell us their version of the story. Welcome, Michael and Adriana.
All right, thanks for having us.
Awesome, great to be here.
So to start with, Michael and Adriana, at the time this mall apartment idea started, you were married. So how did this idea come up? Over the dinner table?
Actually, we were working, do you remember, Mike? We were working on set at another art installation in a mill in Lowell, Massachusetts, actually. And we had the radio on and we heard this ad for the Providence Place Mall. And the ad was acted by a woman who was a mom. And she was talking about how much better her life was going to become now that she could get everything done. She could pamper herself. She could get all the school supplies for her kids. And then the ad ended with, if only I could live there. And I just had this gut reaction. I was like, wait a minute, guys, we should live in the mall.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about that for a long time. When I lived at Fort Thunder, which is an artist collaborative in Eagle Square, we had a glorious amount of space for very, very little rent. That was in the years that the mall opened in 1999. And when the developers came to our neighborhood and said, hey, we want to develop your spaces. We want to knock down your buildings and the places that you live. We were trying to figure out how to respond to all of these threats. And during the course of these sort of ad hoc gatherings at Fort Thunder, the idea of moving to the mall or taking over the mall or living at the mall started to take place. And that seed sort of remained in the background. And several years later, Adriana and I were spending a lot of time together, and we heard this ad on the radio, and Adriana latched onto it right away. She's like, we should live at the mall. And I was like, yeah, we should live at the mall.
What did you do to act on that idea of we should live in the mall?
Well, there was a holiday weekend coming up. It was Columbus Day. Do you remember? And we thought, you know what, we have some days off from work. I was running a nonprofit school at the time, and we thought, let's go to live in the mall for a week. We branded it Week in the Mall, and we created all these constraints and rules for ourselves. And it started out as kind of like this game to see who could survive the longest at the mall before being kicked out. And so we created this very simple rule set that we were going to go to the mall. I think it was like a Friday night, and we were not going to leave. We could get some fresh air in the parking lot, but we could not touch a sidewalk. No phones allowed. We each had a little sketchbook, right?
Yep, it was a sketchbook, flashlight.
Emergency blanket, no toothbrush, no toothpaste.
And where would you sleep at night?
That was the quandary. We committed to the project with no plan. The best plan, right, is no plan.
So what did you do?
The first thing that I did is I went to Nordstrom's and I asked for a shopping bag because I wanted to look like a shopper. That was like our main concern, right? That we were going to be like kicked out for just
loitering.
Loitering. So I wanted to appear as like a purposeful shopper. We also got some face masks, remember, from the nail salon, because we anticipated that any space we were going to sleep in was probably going to be like dusty. So Mike, you had your eye on a space that you remembered from when the mall was being built.
Yeah. So when the mall was being constructed, I had picked up the hobby of jogging and So I would joggle from Eagle Street down Harris, facing the mall the entire time. And so during its construction, I had this nice leisurely, long look at the mall being put together piece by piece, and saw a odd collection of spaces that didn't seem like they would serve a purpose in the future. They were being used as part of the construction's path. So places you would store materials, places that would not be really accessible.
And I remember when we first discovered that space, when it was time to find a place to spend the night, I remember there was like a calendar from like 2001, like one of those calendars with like women in bikinis and like construction gloves, and just it had been completely abandoned and like entombed.
Yeah, tell me about the moment you discovered that space.
As Adriana mentioned, like one of the few items we had was a flashlight. And so without that flashlight, there's no way we could have found that space. To see it was to sort of recognize that you were witnessing a place lost to time. It was ripe for exploration, ripe for ultimately development.
Yeah. And it was so quiet and peaceful. It was like, it felt subterranean and cave-like, like, wow, no light or air has touched this space in many years. So it felt oddly really safe and kind of relaxing to be there, like an oasis, an unintentional oasis in the heart of downtown Providence.
Yeah, tell me about your first night staying in the Secret Mall apartment.
Well, didn't we only bring in $20 a piece? For the week? Right, so that was the other item. We all had $20.
Yeah.
And I think we spent part of our $20 on a pillow. Is that right?
Yes. Actually, we went to Bed Bath & Beyond. We got a pillow. Jay and Andrew bought a sheet, like one sheet to share.
So it's one pillow for 8 people?
No, just for Adriana and I.
The original crew is 4 people. Then 2 of us were sleeping in this space that eventually became the apartment.
I get you.
We fashioned a bed. Do you remember? We fashioned a mattress out of these discarded insulation tiles.
And we had brought in this emergency blanket. So we had the pillow. The pillowcase was the plastic bag from Bed Bath & Beyond.
Yeah. And we just slept in our clothes. I think we like held hands. It was so cold.
It was cold.
It was like we were camping.
Yeah. And we had our masks. So we were in this really dusty space. Just when the lights went out, it was like genuinely dark.
How did you go from the 1 week to deciding to make it a permanent project?
Well, we were there for a few days and we were getting kind of exhausted, right? But we were very committed, right? Because this was an art project. We had set a goal. We were going to spend a week there. And kind of like when the sun set on our 4th day, I think maybe that day was the day we watched every movie in the movie theater, Mike, or maybe it was the next day. But we had a meeting. I think we were just like, we were in the food court where we spent a lot of time.
I think we were at Barnes & Noble.
Barnes & Noble? Oh, we were in Barnes & Noble.
Yeah.
Okay. So we went to Barnes & Noble. And we thought, you know what? We're not getting kicked out. We thought it was going to be this like cat and mouse game with security. Security doesn't care if you're just at the mall walking around. If you steal stuff, that's a problem. But just like being in the space is not, inherently harmful or threatening. We're like, we could just be here forever. We're never going to be kicked out.
Yeah, you bought a pillow.
We got a pillow. We have a mattress, basically. So we could just live here forever. So we had to kind of like up the ante on this, right? And we started talking about how what we had discovered was actually underutilized space, which was not that different from how real estate developers were eyeing the buildings in our own neighborhood. And we thought, wait a minute, we should be developers, micro developers, and develop this into a condominium for artists, actually, mixed use. Like, let's turn the vision and lexicon of these real estate developers on themselves and take back this piece of land that actually we justified that we had the right to it because we paid $200 million in like tax breaks for the mall to be developed. So I was like, technically, this is public space, actually. We just take this chunk away and then we're going to make it beautiful, actually. We're going to develop it into something useful. Aren't we just on the same page as the developers? All they want to do is like make the space more utilized and mixed use. So we did that.
Can you describe the space to me to help our listeners visualize it?
So it's roughly about 750 square feet, which is like the size that you would have like a studio or like one bedroom apartment in a city downtown. When you walk in, it has this kind of funny like triangular kind of like hexagon space, but it has a completely even layer of like fine gray construction dust that is just like a patina on the space. It's pretty dank, but I would say it has good bones, right? Like you can see like the I-beams are there. It's like two steps away from being like industrial chic, but it is very raw. And honestly, it was not that different from the apartment that Mike and I lived in, the artist studio, like a mile down the river, where we had the same concrete floors and concrete dust. So it was familiar. The thing that's different is that there's no window. We had electricity. We had a really long extension cord that we ran from one of the lower spaces that were used for construction.
And what was in the apartment and where did it come from?
We did our best to buy anything we could from the mall and bring it into that space. Anything that was not sold at the mall, we would have to go seek that out somewhere else. The first and foremost was a sectional couch, then an entertainment system and rugs.
It's very domestic. That's what we can say. There's lots of areas to have like polite conversation to entertain guests.
And how many people were involved with the project?
In total, there was 8 artists involved in making the mall apartment. All 8 of those artists were part of a collaborative that were doing a lot of other large public art projects.
So did all 8 people really live there? Or
No,
was it
no.
just, or was it a space to hang out?
It was people would take stints staying there, but everyone had a home. It wasn't a scenario where it's like these are people without other beds to go to.
It's like our treehouse
Yeah.
in the mall.
Treehouse, I like that. Articles about the secret mall apartment, I always ask the question, well, is it a prank? Is it a public art installation? Is it a protest? How do you describe it, Michael?
Oh gosh, I mean, the project was part of many projects that were going on at that time. When I reflect back on it, like I think like, okay, when I was arrested, at that moment becomes the act of curation, and in the act of curation, you are effectively declaring it a story or a narrative or an art object. And Adriana and I took great pains in the months afterwards to sort of curate how the story was going to be told. And so the two of us put on the nice clothes and sat down as a couple in front of news organizations as a couple that just wanted to make it in America. Like we just wanted to like have nice things and living at the mall sort of represented our reach for that goal.
Adriana, how do you describe it?
I think it was just our way of life. I didn't even think about it as a project. It was just like how we spent time as friends and as a family, where we were just exploring our city and just being ridiculous, but that was just like our way of life, right? Like 100%, it did not become a project or a work of art until Mike was arrested and it became like public knowledge in the public domain. Then it becomes a public art project. But we're just like so blessed during that time that we were building out the mall that we didn't really have smartphones. There was no Instagram. There was no like compulsion to like post things on Facebook. It like represents, I think, this like very special time for us where like there was no compulsion to share. Like you could just do things just for the sake of doing things without that like lingering idea in the back of your mind, like, oh, we should really put that on our Instagram or something. So it was a really private project, and it was just a way of life as artists.
I was struck by how carefully you documented the entire project, and there was so much footage from your time at the mall. Did you imagine that this would be a film one day?
Never. Never. That's not at all. The documentation was mostly just us. Okay, we make temporary art for a living, which means that the only thing you have left is documentation. So I have, leading up to the mall project, a lot of practice in just doing my best to capture the process and the final product.
Yeah, how did you not get caught for so long, Michael?
Patience, a lot of patience, intentionality. There was no rush for this idea because there was no end goal. So we were able to sort of very fluidly move within the rhythms of the mall. We knew them really well because we'd spent a lot of time there.
Right.
Ultimately, Mike, don't you feel like we thought like after 2 years, 3 years, and 4 years, then I felt like we're never going to get caught, right? And that's actually how you got caught because you got like a little bit overconfident.
Yeah. No, I let down my guard one time.
Can you tell us about that? What happened?
Having a project last that long only happens if you have rules and everybody is sort of on board with the same rules. And a very simple rule was never bring someone there who wasn't part effectively of that mall 8. Like only the people who were involved in the making of the mall should be allowed to see the space. Very sad for a lot of my best friends. I had an artist visiting from Hong Kong who I was hosting for a week, showing her the best and brightest that Providence has to offer. I was bringing her back to the bus station to send her back to New York City where she would go back to Hong Kong. And I impulsively, in the middle of a morning, was like, you know what? What could it hurt?
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong? And it went wrong.
Yeah, what happened?
I was caught. Basically, we went against the rhythms we had been in for many years. And that meant that we ran into their security force.
And you were arrested, right? What happened? What was the disposition?
It was pretty good, actually. So I will say this is one of those things that made me, I love Providence, and this made me love Providence even more. Our friends at the police, they were humored deeply by it. They've
seen worse.
They had seen worse. I was effectively harmless. They couldn't quite piece together like what had happened. Every time they received new details about how complex our space was, they realized that we were like way past prank territory. That sort of like bewilderment stayed intact all the way to me being in front of a judge. And in front of the judge, the lawyer that the mall had hired went a little overboard in describing our space with exacting details. And so as soon as they go into sort of like talking about the silverware and the clothing and photo albums.
Waffle maker,
right.
Waffle maker.
Yeah, just sort of like really describing what is obviously a very acute domestic space. I didn't say a word in court. And that judge assessed that this was not criminal. They're like, this is not a criminal act. I don't know what it is, but it isn't criminal. So misdemeanor trespassing for you. So obviously trespassing, like world-class trespassing.
And the punishment?
6 months of keep your nose clean. So
probation.
Probation.
You were also banned from going to the mall, right?
For life.
Have you been back since?
Tell
us the truth.
No. I love an arbitrary boundary. So if you put one of those on me, I will follow it.
But how about March 21st? Are you going to go to the mall for the premiere?
Gosh, I hope so. So Jeremy, the director of the movie, and his team has been working really hard to sort of get the movie to show at the mall. And there's, as you can imagine, a lot of conversations happening in the background. As it stands, their team is talking to the mall's team. So there's not an official green light for me, but goodness willing, I get to...
Diplomatic immunity.
Exactly.
Yeah, Adriana, what are your thoughts as the date of the premiere here at the Providence Place Mall approaches?
It's kind of eerie and weird, right? But like oddly, perfectly wonderful. I feel like we wouldn't want the movie to show anywhere else. After Mike was arrested and, clearly it wasn't a crime. If anything, I feel like it was a reverse crime. Like we were trying to give back to the mall. We were like putting things in the mall, right? And trying to make it even more beautiful and interesting. I think that this Providence Place Mall could be like the most interesting mall in the world if they were to embrace this kind of like relationship with artists and especially with our apartments. So I really hope that maybe this is like the gateway into a different kind of relationship between the mall and the artist community.
What do you mean? Like open up that space again and invite people in?
100%. I think that people would come from all over the world to visit the Secret Mall apartment. And the Providence Place Mall has been undergoing some financial duress. There's change of ownerships. There's like talks of bankruptcy. This is the time to think about a new creative economic model And there's no better way to get creative than to invite artists in and collaborate.
What happened after you were arrested? What's become of that space?
What we were told at the time was that they had just dismantled the entire thing and that no one had gone in since that had happened.
I think they threw it out. I think I secretly hope that they kept it somewhere.
I will say I ran into someone who worked at the mall last summer who was able to detail for me, and I'll spare you the details, but I will say that a majority of those items went on to have second lives.
Oh, fascinating.
The best detail I will share, though, is that we had brought up wood floors. So we had brought the wood floors up, and we were 2 days away from installing wood floors. And the wood floors were brought from the mall to someone's home and installed.
Wow.
So
that'll be in the sequel.
Which I'm so delighted that that wood flooring served a purpose.
Do you still both have the key to the apartment?
Yeah.
Do you ever wish you could go back to the secret mall apartment?
Yeah.
How about you, Adriana?
Yeah, I would love to have it as an Airbnb, actually, where people can stay there for the weekend and have that experience. I would make it a condition that you have to surrender your phones. You cannot have a smartphone. You just go there, do a digital detox. And
No Instagram.
Oh, I like that.
No Instagram, yeah.
Michael, Adriana, thank you for speaking with us today.
All right. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was great.
A few weeks after our conversation, Michael Townsend got his wish and returned to the mall apartment. We'll take you there after a quick break. When you want to go beyond the headlines, let me recommend Rhode Island PBS Weekly. Rhode Island PBS Weekly is an award-winning news magazine broadcast that gives you the full story, powered by investigative journalism and narrative storytelling. New episodes of Rhode Island PBS Weekly drop Sundays at 7:30 p.m. on Rhode Island PBS. Watch past episodes at ripbs.org/weekly. That's ripbs.org/weekly.
Yeah. Look at this crew.
When Michael Townsend returned to the mall last week, he was surrounded by a bit of an entourage. A security guard, a maintenance supervisor, the court-appointed receiver of the mall, a photographer, and our columnist at the Globe, Dan McGowan.
So am I following you guys?
Well, you're the one leading the way. So.
Oh, where? Am I leading the way right now?
Yes. At least I think you are. You probably know it better than everybody else.
They weave their way through the industrial insides of the building, off the parking garage, until they reach the steep metal staircase. The mall officials were worried about safety.
Careful, one at a time.
One at a time.
Point, okay?
Sounds good.
Double hands on the rails.
Double hands on all. 3 points of contact.
2 points of contact all the time.
I love it.
Okay.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah. Yes, 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 yes.
Mike reached the top and looked around.
Oh, this space. Oh, funny, it's part of our lamp. Oh no, our China hutch. What? Yes. Part of the wall and the door is still there? Mind-blowing. Mind-blowing.
So, Michael, what are you feeling right now as you there's a bunch of memories rush back?
Well, yes, of course. Well, I feel these are things the emptiness of the space has always been just it's the pull of potential. You're like, oh, this could be turned into something. Still have that gut reaction when I'm like, oh, we are just some furniture pieces away from making this nice again. It's a genuine sense of loss. It's sad to have ideas interrupted. When we came in, you could see the broken glass, and I'm assuming it's just from the China hutch. We managed to get up here without breaking a thing. and out there, that is definitely the China hut glass out there. I can very easily visualize that when they were trying to move that piece out of here, there's no reason to do it gracefully at that point. You're just trying to get rid of it.
Everyone looked around the empty concrete space for a few minutes. Michael posed for some pictures.
Is my grooming good? Okay.
He compared notes with the security guard.
Is this your first time up here?
Me? No, I've been here.
What? Nice.
We already heard about your story, so Like when we get bored, we explore.
You explore, yeah. That's how the original dudes found it.
And the maintenance supervisor.
You had a pulley up here too, didn't you, at one point? Yeah.
No.
You didn't. It was just a rope.
Just a rope.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
No
'Cause
pulley.
There was a little bit of that rope left, not much.
Yeah.
But I ended up throwing it because it got like nasty. So
Oh, yeah.
And then everybody headed back down.
just make sure to face the ladder, guys.
Yes,
Thank you
yes.
so much.
Yeah. Easy as you go.
Will Michael come back and turn this into an apartment again?
No.
Told you it was on the table.
We had a good run. It was an idea of that time.
But Michael will be back tomorrow for the premiere of the film. He's been officially pardoned, so now he can enter the mall whenever he pleases. He just can't live there. To see pictures of Michael Townsend returning to the mall apartment, go to globe.com/Rhode Island. That's globe.com/Rhode Island. Rhode Island Report is a production of the Boston Globe in collaboration with Rhode Island PBS. Today's episode was produced by Megan Hall. Audio mixing and mastering by Marissa Ewing of Hemlock Creek Productions. Our music is from APM. Be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'm Ed Fitzpatrick. See you next week. Looking to binge watch all your favorite PBS shows? You need Rhode Island PBS Passport. Masterpiece, Antiques Roadshow, Rhode Island PBS Weekly, and many more. Watch them all, anytime, and from any streaming device. Learn more about this member benefit at ripbs.org/passport. That's ripbs.org/passport.